And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here.
And James coming in from Westchester, New York.
And this is UFO News Network Sunday with our second Twitter Circle Roundtable. A record-breaking panel here today. We've got six count them, UFO nuts. Going to talk about UFOs for the next hour plus. Let's not waste any time. Let's bring this esteemed panel in. First off, never been on the show before. Making his debut appearance here, and I think perhaps his debut appearance on any kind of UFO talk show or panel discussion show. The man himself. If George Knapp is the president of your fan club, you're doing something right. Ryan from Post Disclosure World. Ryan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be on your show.
It's a real honor to have you. It really is. Absolutely. Next up, we've got a guy who was with us earlier this year as a guest. He's Chris Wolford, investigator, researcher. Chris, thanks for making the same mistake twice. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Chris is with us all the way over from England. We have Twitter user Jay. A lot of the news that we're going to be covering took place over in Europe. So Twitter user Jay, thanks for coming on board. I know you're going to have a lot to share with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me back on. Nice to speak to you all. I look forward to this show. Should be good.
Yep, definitely. And last but not least, Danny Silva. He's got his new website up and running since the last time he was on with us, silverrecord.com. Danny has had a busy week. And he informed us via Twitter last night, announced for all the world to see. He's got a big announcement for us today. So, Danny, let's not waste any time. Thanks for coming back. And what's the big news you've got for us?
Man, thank you for having me. I really like talking to you guys. It's so much fun. I was kind of just going to work it in. I might have oversold it a little bit on Twitter, but basically what Dave Beatty, our good friend Dave Beatty, told me. I don't know if y'all saw the Steve Bassett press release.
Oh yeah,
that he was doing.
Yep.
So actually, let me get the quote here. It was Bassett is sending out the movie, the Nimitz Encounters movie, to I think he said 1,000 media outlets, along with the press release, and then after that, he's going to be sending it to his congressional connections. Fantastic. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, like we have the Nimitz Encounters movie, and it's like this huge tool now that we can show to people. So Dave really outdid himself, and it's going to be a big thing. And To the Stars Academy is watching it. Politicians are watching it. Everyone is watching this stuff. We could show it to skeptics. We could show it to people that have never heard about the event. So it's really cool.
It is. Absolutely, Dave, it is. Oh, go ahead, James.
I was going to say, Dave did such a great job on that. I know we're going to talk about it a bit later in the show, but when I was watching that, I was like, really put you in the perspective of being like a pilot or something, and seeing something like that. It's a much much more shocking, I guess, than just reading about the story or even seeing the gun camera footage, the clear footage.
Yeah, it shows everything, and it spells it out for you. Did y'all see the new post by Kevin Day just now, a couple of hours ago?
Are you talking about the one mentioning Gary Voorhees?
Yeah, and that in January it sounds like maybe there'll be a Tic Tac, some sort of like an entertainment show or some documentary or something coming out in January. So that's kind of big news too.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it seems like it was Mellon, who is Chris Mellon, who was doing some of the interviews. So apparently he's going to be part of this show.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mellon interviewed Gary, and then Tom and Elizondo interviewed Kevin last summer, I think it was.
Kevin Day. And we've seen those pictures, so we know that happened. So they are busy producing TV shows. Well, let's get to the news. A couple weeks back was TTA making some news again out of Rome, Italy. Wake up Saturday morning. Normally I work Saturdays, but I called out this particular Saturday. So I get up, and see that there's sort of an ad hoc UFO conference they put together in Rome. DeLong and Elizondo were both there. They did their little presentation, and we were able to catch it live, able to do a little bit of a live chat along with it over at my group on Facebook, the UFO News Network group. And it was pretty interesting. It was a very entertaining, I guess, maybe hour and a half or so that they ran. DeLong started things off, and as per usual, he had some interesting things to say. It didn't go long. I don't think he went much. If he went over 5 minutes, I'd be surprised. He didn't go through a lot of material. But basically, he said that what he's doing for UFOs, what Elon Musk and Bob Bigelow are doing for private space travel, and he also said that he's currently working to launch satellites into space with lasers, work on artificial intelligence projects, and anti-gravity. So that was Tom's statement. Right now, what he's saying, I would say I'll believe it when I see it, taking a wait-and-see attitude. Anybody else have any kind of thoughts on those types of extravagant claims coming from Tom?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I think one of their big things is to sell a defense contract. I think that's certainly where they're going. And by them going overseas, they're kind of like, putting the U.S. on their toes, saying, "Hey, if we don't get it first, somebody else might." I think they're kind of taking that approach. But also in connecting with the other governments, if they're able to access some of their data, their databases, they can really analyze a lot of different materials. If they have, even footage, just say that the Rome has, Italy has footage. Italy might let TTSA put out some of their gun camera footage, just like they got from the Department of Defense.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking that they likely brought cameras with them, that this little road trip is going to be part of whatever shows they've got coming up the early part of next year. We'll see some behind the scenes stuff. And yeah, they might pick up some case information that they can run on the show as well. And we would definitely like to see that. From the panel, any thoughts on where DeLong's at now and where this might be going?
One thing that stuck out to me was that DeLong said he made that database comment that he wants to be doing a database with AI. And ever since George Knapp said that there was a government database, that really clicked with me. And I just think it's a really, really huge story. Jay was digging into it on Twitter. He referenced the Valet database. What was it, Capella? And I just think this database is a really big deal. There's like ATIP and all these people probably have access to the United States version. Maybe there's all these different databases that have kind of came together as one. But if we are able to find out more about that and some of the other things that are in there, I think it's going to be huge.
Looking for patterns in the data. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. I was looking at the actual presentation itself, and it's got all kinds of interesting stuff in there. The kind of things that they're looking for. So they're looking for unknown patterns, physics of the phenomenon, these kind of things. And when I was looking through details about this database, this Cabela database, I found some details about BAS and some of the US Federal Aviation Administration documents as well, which is fascinating. There were some really interesting parts in there. So they actually referred to BAS in some of these official documents, and they say that BAS is an organization devoted to the exploration of extremely advanced aerospace technology. When you see this stuff written into official documents, it kind of blows your mind, really. And it seems to back up exactly what Bigelow is looking into, and with NIDS and BAS and all this kind of stuff.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it even said that the FAA was to send reports to BAS, for encounters. I mean, that's pretty insane. You have a government-funded agency sending UFO reports to a private. Well, now we know that BAS actually had defense contracts, so that's a different story, also.
Well, it also refers to NIDS as well. So, which was the previous scientific organization that was headed up by Bigelow as well. So it talks about that they used to send all of the files and data to NIDS. And it says now that NIDS is defunct, you need to send all of the data now to BAS. And as part of this document, it has telephone numbers, it has email addresses, and all that kind of stuff for sending this information through to Bass in official documents, which is pretty mind-blowing, really.
It is.
It's also kind of cool just that we got to hear from DeLong. You know, I don't think we have really heard from him in 2018 at all. Even though this was really short, it was cool that he talked. And other than like some of those Q&As from the book releases, this has been it for 2018.
Yeah. I think after the Rogan thing, he kind of, took a step back.
And I expect that he's the guy who
Weird.
does the sit downs with the TV networks and gets those deals put together too. I expect that's a lot of where his efforts are going these days.
Yeah.
When I was watching back through the Rogan interview just a couple of days ago, but it seems to me, he got a lot of slack for that interview. But everything that he was saying that was going to be coming out has either come out already, or seems like it might be coming out over the next few months. We need to see some of the results of some of these experiments on the material that he was referring to. But lots of what he was talking about is come to pass. So
I loved that Rogan interview. I thought it was great. Everyone, a lot of people are critiquing it. I thought it was great. And then Rogan's critiques were before the New York Times released that stuff. So I feel like he kind of had to eat his words, which he didn't.
Yeah,
But
the interview seemed to go through a little bit of a touchy point very early on. DeLong, if you remember, asked Rogan specifically, have you done a lot of research on this? Have you really looked into it? And Rogan said no. He really hadn't done any kind of background.
Rogan's a closet UFO buff. He knows quite a lot. He actually knows the Bob Lazar story quite well. And he also knows Whitley Strieber's story very well, too. In fact, he was just talking about Whitley Strieber to another comic, and he was describing to the other comic that he was a science fiction writer. Then all of a sudden he got this idea, I'm going to go in this direction, that I was abducted. So he kind of shifted gears and made his audience and that comedian think that, Whitley Strieber is just making this stuff up. And I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't seem that Whitley is making anything up.
Well, Rogan has gone on the record recently saying there's no evidence, no substantial evidence for the reality of the UAP phenomena. And my impression is he just doesn't want to be associated with anything conspiratorial whatsoever, except for JFK. He just doesn't want to be associated with. In his mind, he thinks that he comes off as someone who's not so bright because he subscribes that UAP are real. So he toes this very, very strict line of there's no evidence. And of course, that's ridiculous. And when he was doing the interview with Tom DeLong, he didn't even know who was on the panel on the October 11th press conference. I mean, how could you that would take 5 minutes of preparation. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think that moment when he said that he hadn't done any background research threw DeLong a little bit. He was expecting a guy to be well prepared and have detailed questions. And when that obviously was not going to happen, he had to kind of rethink his strategy a little bit. So,
but again,
I think
Rogan,
that was an issue there.
I'm sorry, Frank. Rogan had a show on Sci-Fi Channel that looked at UFOs. He interviewed Eric Davis. Well, not him. Duncan Trussell did.
Right.
But he interviewed. Yeah. So I agree with Ryan that he doesn't want to be associated with conspiracy theorists, and I kind of hate that term. But he has Eddie Bravo on, and Eddie Bravo is the king of conspiracy theorists. Funny little story. There was a comedian that is on the Sam Tripoli podcast, real quick, who was talking about the ATIP program and all that, what took place. And I reached out to him through a Twitter just recently and mentioned, hey, you need to look at this short film, which was Dave Beatty's The Nimitz Encounters. And he got back to me and said he could not believe how well done that was. But he also said that he would like to know other documentaries or other places to look to for this phenomenon, or people to listen to. So I kind of give him a list of things and people to look at for this phenomenon. So I just thought that was kind of cool.
I thought there was something quite interesting that was part of the actual the video that was prepared by Dave, and it was also written into the TTSA paper that wasn't present in the actual original report. If you read the original report about the incident itself, it does not mention the weapon systems. On the actual video, and as part of the TTSA report, they seem to add this information about the weapon systems as part of the planes, which is never in the original report.
What about do you mean that they weren't armed at the time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
That
And
seems
another
to be an addition that was added to the TTSA report, which I just find interesting. Do you know what I mean? Why is there that inconsistency? Whether it is information they got later, I don't know. But there's definitely that is different between the two reports.
Ryan, you wanted to go ahead?
Yeah, one thing I learned through his documentary, and I didn't come across this, some of you probably have, is Beatty spoke to someone off the record that it wasn't public, that when the pilot saw the Tic Tac, there was like a mirage kind of appearance to it, and you notice that in the documentary itself, he does put like a mirage like appearance to the Tic Tacs, and I saw him make a comment about that somewhere. I don't know if you guys have heard
Yeah, I
about that.
remember vaguely him saying something like that. I know that other people that were actually at the Tic Tac said events have been corresponding with Dave. So maybe Frank and James, you need to have Dave back on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's in the plans, no doubt. We'll get through a thorough review of the movie as well.
Yeah, we wanted to have him on like during the day of the release, but everybody's schedules are so crazy. But
I hear you.
We plan on having him come back on just to talk about the video, even if we do a short. But
real quick, I will say this, Jay. What he just mentioned about the armament not being armed because it was a Sideliner missile that could not come off the rail. I want to say it was the Fravor interview with Jeremy Corbell, and don't quote me if this is on YouTube or not, but he maintains that the Two Stars account and what his account is slightly is different.
Right.
Meaning, yeah, so maybe there was some lost in translation stuff there. I don't know.
Yeah. So the only reason I mention it is those documents that came off the Chris Mellon website. When the Nimitz call up to the pilots, there's in the original report that was from Chris Mellon's website does not mention the weapon systems. They have a different conversation. It was only in the report that was released by TTSA on their website that mentions these weapon systems. I mean, it's possible that the pilots mentioned it later and clarified and said, "Oh, by the way, they asked about weapon systems," but it wasn't present in that original report. So maybe that's what he's referring to. Could be.
Yeah, people speculated that the Mellon leak was kind of like some of the information in there was like a preliminary like a briefing package just to kind of sell the what they're I don't mean that in a bad way, kind of pitch their idea and what they're doing, and it wasn't a final cut.
Another really interesting thing about all this, and Dave made sure to add it to the film, is the what was it, those little hooks or whatever,
the canards,
appendages.
Yeah, that's insane. That's just so cool.
Yeah. Well, we'll double back to Dave's movie. We're gonna everybody here has seen it, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, everybody's seen it.
It was amazing.
So we'll double back and we'll talk about Dave's movie. But let's get back to the conference over in Italy. DeLong wrapped up his brief comments, and then Louis Elizondo took the floor, and basically the first part of his presentation covered UFO history. And I thought that was pretty interesting because one of the things he was saying very early on, late last year and into the early part of this year, was when he had his job running ATIP, he did not really get into the history of UFOs. He just basically took the cases as they came and dealt with what was in front of him. And 2 weeks back, he's at this conference, and he goes through essentially his version of UFO history. This was pretty interesting stuff, and I was wondering what feedback we've got from the folks who watched that presentation. Went through Roswell. He dropped the Roswell case. He talked about cases through the 50s and 60s, 70s. Brought it right up to today. Feedback on Elizondo's little history lesson on UFOs.
He, of course, he mentioned the Rendlesham stuff. So that was like this huge bombshell. And he said he gave the 4-month window. So I think it's before February 27th is when the 4 months expires. And he said 4 months, in 4 months, we'll hear more information about it. He said that, what was it? It would make Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I don't know, seem like nothing, or I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
It's just a big deal. And I think all of us have wanted Elizondo to be speaking about the history of stuff and to be speaking about other things, because he's always stopped short with ATIP. So the fact that he did that now is really incredible, and it's really positive for the community.
Yeah, I thought his choices of what to include and what not to include were very interesting. And one real specific mention that he came up with in one of his slides really kind of surprised me when talking about the 70s. He mentioned the CIA Weird Desk, which has been manned by Alfred Lundahl, Kit Green, Ron Pandolfi over a period of years. I'll tell you what, I don't know if he was listening live, but as soon as he heard about it, I expect that Grant Cameron was doing some backflips over that.
He did. He was very excited about that. But the thing that excited me the most, I know that it was a long conference and a long, lecture, but the fact that he mentioned Rendlesham over 3 nights, I was doing backflips over, because most researchers think it's 2 or 1 or it's a lighthouse or what have you. But that for me was huge, because that means that he is taking into account possibly what John Burroughs on the 3rd night, not the 1st night, but the 3rd night, and Adrian Bustinza, and I know I'm going to mention a name here that's going to get me scolded, but I don't really care, is Larry Warren's account. So
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah, I think we're going to go into some more detail on all that. We'll
right.
have a little show dedicated to just clearing up a lot of misconceptions. You mentioned the lighthouse, Chris. That still floats around out there as a prosaic explanation
Yeah.
for the whole thing. I think we can knock that down pretty quick and easy.
Yeah,
Larry
no.
Warren
Yeah.
is apparently going to be featured in a documentary about the case called Capel Green. That's going to be coming out shortly. Not so sure about that. We'll have to see what they've got together. Gary Hesseltine is involved in that. That's the Rendlesham case. If we got time out, we're definitely going to double back and talk a little bit about that and some of the connections to other paranormal hotspots around the world. But that was that little indicate. And by and large, it was, I thought, a very good little history lesson. If someone was completely unfamiliar with the history, he covered a lot of ground. I thought he did a nice job. But one area where he did make a little bit of a mistake, and not surprisingly, caught nothing but heat over it, was he included as a graphic when discussing the DC-52 case. He included a graphic that is actually a frame grab from a video that was prepared for a television documentary about the case, or that covered the case anyway. And he showed that and presented it as a legitimate photograph of the actual event. That is not the case. That little video has been floating around a while. I've actually got up right now a graphic. I've included it as an illustration only in an article that I wrote at my website about the DC-52 case. So I knew the provenance of the image. I frame grabbed it myself out of the full video that's floating around and sharpened it up a little bit. But it's there over at my website. One big shame is I think that the DC-52 UFO case is the greatest UFO case of all time. I really do. And people are arguing back and forth about the provenance of this picture, which is an illustration. It's not a real picture of the event.
Well, I saw it as a representation of something that he had to visually show. Because like I've said before, if you sit there through a lecture and you don't have visual aids, people are going to snore and fall asleep and they're not going to pay attention. Now, he did go back and apologize for using that photo.
Yeah, I mean, he presented the photo as if it was a legitimate photo. He said that these are legitimate photos of the case, and that was a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only Robert Schaefer.
There should have been copy on that photo that said for representational purposes only, and then he wouldn't even have to pointed it out verbally. But that was a pretty.
Well, see that what he pointed out verbally, Ryan, was that this is a legitimate photo of the incident, and it's not
exactly.
It was a mistake. It makes it a little bit hard on us when we're trying to battle these skeptics and naysayers and whatnot. But it was a mistake. He admitted it. So to me, it's
Yeah, he
not
got
some
mad.
big
Yeah.
deal breaker.
But Danny, let's look at it this way. This is they've been making this kind of mistake on a regular basis. You have to wonder if after a while, these are pretty sharp guys, if they're not doing these things deliberately just to drive people like Schaefer and Kirk Collins nuts.
It's odd. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it either. It's kind of odd, but
It shows me that, or at least, I'm sorry, guys. It tells me that they're doing it all on their own, and that's good. I don't want an external force, i.e., the U.S. government, telling them what they can or cannot talk about, right? So that tells me they're doing that on their own, at least to me. I don't know what you guys think.
that's a great point.
I think they better not make this mistake again, is what I think.
Yeah, it's kind of bad at this point.
They
Three
could have called
strikes, you're
us.
out.
They could have called us. We would have told them. No, that's an illustration. It's from an old TV documentary. But yeah, that's where that's at. So anyone else have any takeaways from the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah,
I thought it
so-
was very
Sure.
interesting that Elizondo was asked about patterns regarding the data, where UAP go and so forth. And he said that he would not go further into it because I guess it was classified. But all he could say is they congregate from his studies at the ATIP. They congregate around water and around nuclear facilities. And I think that information is essential because ATIP's whole objective is to learn what are they, and how do they work, and are they a national security threat or not? So from a personal standpoint, I would love to delve further into the patterns of where they see these UAP most often, how long they spend at various locations. But apparently that's very classified. But I think that would be very useful for us who are studying the phenomenon.
Yeah.
No, I
The
agree.
data always matters. Absolutely.
Yeah, it
Anyone
gets
else?
into some-
Anyone else want to
Yeah.
jump in?
Yeah, let me getting back to when Elizondo was going over the history, he mentions Bentwaters. And during that he mentioned that he briefed 4 people from the Bentwaters case. So how does somebody like Elizondo brief people on an event that they were part of
I
later
thought he
on?
said he debriefed them.
Yeah, he debriefed them. So, but the interesting part about that is,
And we know also, sorry about this, James, but we also know that John Burroughs was one of them.
Yeah.
John Burroughs made a post saying, "Listen, guys, cat's out of the bag. I've been speaking to Elizondo. So that's one thing. But you also have to wonder, because everybody knows that the Rendlesham documents, they went missing. They were supposed to be declassified and put out with one of those UK releases, and they disappeared. So you got to wonder with Elizondo's clearance level, since he has such a high clearance, if he might have gotten access to some of them, or if he is part of this ATIP database, and there was an older database before that had been doing what ATIP was doing, back when until present day, even if it wasn't at such an official capacity, if he might have been able to get something on that case that nobody has really had access to since. That's always one interesting thing, because you have to consider, ATIP, if it started in 2007 or 2008, how do they have all that information from the Nimitz when the Nimitz was in 2004? So they have access to some kind of database that's prior to ATIP and OSAP.
Oh, they must do. I would have thought the database that Varley had been mentioning must contain all of that data. So it would contain anything from NID to BAS and then through to ATIP. We know BAS probably ended in 2010. So I'd assume, they must have cancelled it out because of ATIP, something like that, because they're going to be continuing the research, within the government. I would hazard a guess, and that database must still be present somewhere, have all of that data still available.
Yeah, Knapp has said several times, and Elizondo. Elizondo said the program's still going on.
So does Jeremy Corbell.
Yeah. Jeremy Corbell and Knapp, they all have said that.
Yep.
Several times. So, there's still some database collection going on, whether it's an official capacity or if it's just people doing it within their own, roles as an extra. I'm not sure, but it seems that Elizondo had access to events from the past if he was able to Again, if they were able to study the Nimitz encounter and get all that data, where did they get it from? If it was from 2004,
I
and
think, I think that Knapp had said that it turned up. There was a file on it in some general's desk somewhere. That it was just kind of laying around. It really wasn't going anywhere.
yeah,
And
but
Elizondo was able to turn it up. But is
yeah,
that we have any other thoughts on Elizondo before we move on to our next topic?
yeah, just one more, and that's another thing. If the program stops in 2012, how do they have the gimbal and go fast footage? That's from 2015.
Right.
Yeah, but
So
It didn't
it
end,
did
did
stop.
it? I think
It
Elizondo
did.
said it never ended. Yeah,
It
might
never
have just
ended.
changed names.
But
Yeah, they've changed
yeah,
names twice. We know that already. Maybe it just changed name a third time. Maybe it's just a cycle they go through.
These programs tend to change their names because they want to stay 2 or 3 steps ahead of people like Paul Dean. Seriously.
Yep.
I'm not joking. Seriously.
No, yeah, you're right about that. No, you're
I
right.
mean, they
There's
don't
constant
want to
rebranding.
get it or give any information out if they don't have to. So,
yeah,
Yep.
until they want to. So they're ready.
well, it's going to be like prying from their dead cold hand or cold dead hands. I can't talk. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it must be coming out, though. I think it must be some sort of decision within the US government to start bringing this information out. You know, it may have been the case for a long, long time now. You look at all these old films, pieces of literature and stuff like that. You know, some of this information's been around for years and years and years. I've been recently reading a bit about John Keel. He did the book called, what's it called? The Haunted Planet. Haunted Planet. And he talks about ultra-terrestrials, parahumans, kind of like some sort of civilization that was present here before us, this kind of stuff. You know, this information's been around for years, and I think that book was dated 1970. You know what I mean? Who knows where this information originally came from, but it seems like it's been a slow release, and it's just like a waterfall at the moment. It's just all going to come out.
I think the topic of has TTSA and all this stuff been co-signed by higher groups or by people in the government is really, really fascinating. I think it's probably everything is true at the same time where it has been co-signed. And Elizondo mentioned this when George Knapp asked him about it on Coast to Coast, that he thinks maybe it had been. And then, of course, there's also, people that are upset about everything and they're trying to block everything. Because also Knapp has said that he isn't so sure that there's a disclosure effort going on. So maybe everything is true at the same time and it's just different factions.
I think it is different factions. I mean, you had the people within ATIP who wanted to shut it down because of religious connotations or conflictions in their own life, and that's a problem. So,
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, going back to Keel again, like reading through his book, so he talks about ultra-terrestrials and he talks about good and bad, and he refers to them as Alpha being the good one and Omega being the bad one. And he also refers to the Alpha one being called the Elohim. So there's all this like incredible stuff that he's written about, like years and years and years ago, which people are talking about today. Again, just sort of picking up on this information.
In Elizondo's resignation letter, he seemed to indicate that Secretary of Defense James Mattis was insulated from ATIP. And George Knapp made the same sentiment in a recent interview on the Phenomenon radio program. And to me, this really gives you a glimpse of how much whoever is in control of this in the Pentagon, how much they wanted a secret. I mean, if they're insulating it from the actual Secretary of Defense, you can only imagine how much for a very long period of time they did not want just normal everyday Americans to know. And this kind of lends credibility to what Chris was saying, how they changed the name so that to make it difficult for anyone to access the data through Freedom of Information Act or otherwise. And I don't know whether it's true or not that Mattis was insulated from it, but if we were to take what Elizondo indicated and as well as his resignation letter, then yeah, apparently James Mattis is the number one guy in the Department of Defense, did not know about ATIP, and for all we know, didn't even know about the phenomena of craft infiltrating highly secret and airspace that they're not allowed to obviously engage. And to me, it's mind blowing.
What's really cool is that story that I think Knapp told about how supposedly Mattis was pulled aside at some event the day before Elizondo, or I guess maybe before TTSA was going to come forward. I guess it would have been Elizondo. And he was basically briefed right then and there and said, hey, this is happening tomorrow, by the way.
Yeah, they said, Knapp said that during a social event, somebody pulled Mattis aside and said, hey, this is coming out tomorrow in the New York Times. And that's when the story broke back to December 16, 2017.
And it's been a good year. It's been a good year since.
Yeah. And so, from what we're looking at, I don't want to go with like the dangling carrot, but it looks like we're going to be getting a lot in 2019. We have all these, there's a few Rendlesham shows. Some of them are, one of them obviously is not connected in any way to the stars. It's just like a docudrama kind of series with Lawrence Fishburne. But the, John Burroughs had posted pictures from the History Channel of Elizondo in the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And, he was kind of insinuating that this History Channel interview with Elizondo was related to the Rendlesham event.
Yes, I believe one of the people interviewed from Elizondo was the person in Ohio, that piece that fell from the sky or what have you.
Yeah.
The woman. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. And obviously during that event we saw they have a ton of pieces. They have a ton of samples. I know.
Yeah, it looked like a good dozen that they had up there.
Yeah, and Keith Basterfield has put together a collection of. He did a few pieces on the material aspects. I think he did one just on the TTSA presentation, and then now he's created a whole larger like public database of all the samples of interest that are being looked at, which is a fantastic thing. I got to put the link in the description because it's a phenomenal report of these materials. But so we have that show coming out on the History Channel. And Tom DeLonge mentioned that he sold 3 UFO related shows to major network television. And obviously we're getting they've been talking about there's going to be an initial materials analysis report coming in January or February. Didn't Knapp say something like that?
He said, I don't know if he said an analysis or an announcement. I'm kind of confused about what exactly is coming, but yeah, something from Adam Project is coming. He said, quote, after the first of the year.
Yeah, I think we're going to get like an initial report. Yeah, that's my speculation. And also, it just so happens around that same time we're supposed to be getting more videos, either FLIR videos or gun camera footage videos regarding some of these cases.
I believe, though, those videos will not be released in the same vein. And I have no proof or anything, but if I were them, I would put that in the show that's going to be coming out. It's funny how the History Channel's got Project Blue Book, this unnamed To the Stars UFO UAP show coming out with Lou Elizondo, Tom DeLonge, Kevin Day, Gary from ATIP, the group. So that's going to be interesting. But I would think they'll put the videos in there. I don't know, maybe.
I've heard something along those lines too. But at the same time, if you're going to have like an official release of a DoD gun cameras or FLIR footage, I think my own opinion is better than just like premiering it in some cool TV show would be to put it out through an official news channel. I think that'd be more impactful, really, to make the headline of the papers rather than a TV show.
It'd be more believable, because if you're putting in a TV show, people are going to be like, "Oh, this isn't a TV show." But if it's like an official release and the media is covering it, then people who are not into UFOs will perceive it as more credible. So yeah, I would think that'd be a better way to do it. But
you got to remember, this is from the U.S. government. It's all predicated on what they want. If they want in the TV show, so it's watered down a little bit, it's going to be in the TV show. I'm just thinking.
And that kind of goes.
Advocate.
And that kind of goes around with, what Grant Cameron is saying, like you put it out there and you pull it back and you kind of mess it up.
Yeah, but are we still there though? You know what I mean? We're getting so much closer to the promised land. It's like at some point you don't pull back anymore. It's like you've already gone too far, and it's just like you're releasing stuff. Like there's no pulling back. Like we had December 16th, we had the 3 gun camera videos. It's just we had Fravor go on every news station you can imagine. Like to me, we're at a point where there's no pulling back. Like we're too far deep in, and now whoever is in the Pentagon, who is in favor for greater transparency and has the leverage, has pressed that button. And from my perspective, it's about it's go time, and the beginning of 2019 is it, and that's when the skeptics are all going to be depressed.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. I hope that's the case, but history is unfortunately showing us that 2 steps ahead and 1 step back always. But so, I'm not trying to be throw a wet blanket on that, but we'll just have to wait and see what comes forward. I mean, if anything, we know stuff is coming forward. That's a good thing. I mean, if this was 1980s, we wouldn't know anything, right? We'd be still in the dark. But this is cool that we all had this ability to talk to each other via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, even Instagram. It's pretty awesome that we're able to come together and get this ball rolling. I do think we all play a part in this snowball.
And Elizondo was explicit about the videos. He said not only are more videos going to be released, but they're just as good as the ones previously released, and they're more spectacular. Yeah. So he's
one thing that occurred to me about Rendlesham, and I'm not sure because I'm just speculating here. When Elizondo said in 4 months, I was kind of thinking, hey, it's going to be government documents, or it's going to be metamaterial analysis, or it's going to be some crazy stuff like in a big press release. But like you guys were saying, maybe it will just be part of one of these entertainment shows or documentaries. But I hope it's a lot more than that.
I think it is at this point. I mean, again, to have that video footage premiere in a TV show, I don't see that they would see that as a benefit to what they're doing. I think they understand that they need to hit again with the mainstream media, and I think that's part of their conditioning process. That they're, obviously, if Jim Semivan was partially responsible for the New York Times article and the Washington Post and Politico all posting the same, story on the same day, which took months of planning and vetting and writing and investigation by the news sources. How do you get the Washington Post and the New York Times to say, hey, I'm not going to get the story out a day before you to beat you on it? So, I mean, for them to release the story on the same day, that's very coordinated. I don't think they're going to come out with another set of videos and be like, let's do it through History Channel this time. Yeah. I don't see
we'll
that happening.
see.
I know, and I hope that's not the case.
And releasing the videos is good hype for the TV show too. If they release the videos through the mainstream,
right?
And,
exactly.
We'll go through all the details on these videos in the show. But here's the video. They might do it that way.
I think that'd be great. That'd be and some people would be like, oh, they're just putting out these videos to pitch a TV show. But it's like, wait, hold on, who's putting this out to pitch a TV show if it's being declassified through the government?
Well, we still have people who are crying that it's not truly been declassified. They still want their chain of custody. They can't they want their cake and their icing all at the same time, and that's not the way this works. It's never going to be the way it works.
Yeah, I think eventually we might hit a point where there is some kind of transparency there, but I think that's after this kind of stuff is said and done that we're going to see something like that.
That'd be so far. I mean, from me thinking legalities, they've lied about this for so long. They just don't want any blowback. They really don't. Like Ryan said in his video, they don't want any blowback coming towards them.
They want to minimize it because there will be blowback. And
for sure, there's going to be lawsuits. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Heck yeah, there will be.
Well,
I'm still angry about S4, so don't even get me started on that.
Don't worry, Ryan. When they announce it, we'll take a tour together. I'll drive there myself.
I do believe it's a crime against humanity, and I'm not in that camp that thinks, oh, they had the. I'm not in that camp. Nope. Maybe during the Cold War, but the Cold War has been over for a very long time. And I was watching Corbell's recent YouTube upload about Lazar, and Lazar said that the only reason he could think of as to why there's secrecy behind it is because if you give that to the world, you tell them we have alien aircraft with very exotic technology that can create ridiculous amounts of energy. If you start opening that Pandora's box and you start putting that into the scientific community, the problem is now you've created a level 2 of nuclear capabilities that's way more dangerous, could destroy the world much more easily. You could weaponize it in a million different ways. And so Lazar was basically saying the only thing he can think of is they've put it into such deep levels of secrecy so that the world does not have to contend with this level of technology, because the world will be worse off if you bring this out to the open. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think you can keep it all secret, but you can also reveal to the world that yes, we have craft from another star system, and that's, in my opinion, that's what should be undertaken.
There was also the DeLong hot take, and I think it was the Jimmy Church interview where he said, what was it, that they don't want the others to know what we have accomplished.
I think that's a bit silly.
Yeah,
I don't buy that. Like, I've never bought that.
They can use nanobots, right? You get into a skiff, those aliens, man, they got little nanobots will fly right into that skiff and listen.
Exactly.
You're gonna say. I mean, there's a million different ways they could infiltrate, knowing what the CIA and the Pentagon is doing. I mean, when you hear Lazar talk about how that technology, that propulsion system is just ridiculous, and no one understands how it works. Well, just extrapolate that level of technology and put it into other areas of eavesdropping, whatever. You can't hide anything from the others, in my opinion.
No,
Yeah,
they're not
agree.
listening to the radio.
I think that's and I did a video like a few years ago talking about establishment disclosure, and of course they're going to put their spin on it, and I think that's kind of part of their spin, and that maybe Tom DeLonge's part of his jobs or whatever, being given this access is to kind of pitch that kind of spin where they're going to minimize any kind of damage and save face, because if they are going to bring this out, why would they do it in a way that would be harmful to the establishment itself? It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't even be good for us, really, because we don't need that kind of destabilization. We need stabilization more than ever. So if that's kind of part of what they're going with, I understand why they're saying that. And even if you just put the idea out there and it's not true, there's going to be people that are going to subscribe to it no matter what, and it justifies the secrecy.
And maybe it is all battlefield advantages, and I'm sorry, I was just saying maybe it is all battlefield advantages, and it's stuff we don't know about and we're not privy to. I don't know.
Okay, well,
let's.
Go ahead. Sorry about that. Yeah, I want to move on to our next topic, though. But make it quick, if you could, Jay.
I was just going to say, I think it's going to come out anyway. No matter what happens, whether the government wants it to or not, this information is coming out. Do you know what I mean? We've seen so much happen in the last 12 months. It's going to come one way or another.
Yeah, I'm going to say, and if any agents or anything are listening, guess what? It's going to come out. It's going to come out because Twitter Jay will leak you.
That's right, Jack Brewer.
Twitter user Jay will get it out there.
What I think TTSA has done is they awakened a sleeping giant. They awakened the UFO community.
They awakened the Congress.
Yep. So let's move on now, and let's move over. Hang on a sec. Let me get the slide up here. Hang on a sec. This past week, there was a case over Ireland, a UFO case. Got a lot of coverage. Ryan, I know you did a video about it early in the week. Danny, you played a little role in making this whole thing happen in the first place. So we'll talk about all this. But what basically happened was there was a sighting of an object flying over Ireland, sighted by at least 3 different pilots, maybe more. Basically, all these flights were engaged, and I've got a graphic up now. I don't know if you boys can see it from where you're at, but I've sent it along to you. It's basically from flightradar24.com. It's basically gives you roughly the location and direction of where these planes are flying at roughly the time of the incident. Basically, what you've got on this graphic, I've got 2 flights circled because we know definitively that the lady who first called it to everybody's attention and who saw the object was the British Airways flight that is circled, and that's flying overland in Ireland, and also off the coast of Ireland, a Virgin Air flight coming in from the Barbados also gets a real good look at the object. Another pilot that we're not sure which plane he was in because he doesn't specifically identify himself, but he also sees the object. And this garnered a lot of attention. We'll talk about the media implications, but right now on the audio end here, what I want to do is go radio silent and play the actual tape. It's about 2.5 minutes worth of the essential conversation. And if you guys can listen in on your end, great. You might have heard it already, so you remember it. But our fans at home should be able to listen to this right now.
American 86, we're flight level 370, and it is smooth again.
American 86, Shannon, hello, radar contact, and it seems to be smooth ahead of you as well.
Shannon, Silva 94.
Go ahead.
Any military traffic you got right now?
34.260. 134.26, Singapore 25 confirmed. Paper.
That's all.
Okay, sir, there's nothing showing on either primary or secondary.
Okay, it was moving so fast, in fact, you can no longer see it, but yes, thank you.
990. 5 by 5, thank you.
Alongside you?
Get to come up on our left-hand side and then rapidly veer to the north. Being so bright light and then it just disappeared at a very high speed. We were just wondering. We didn't think it was a likely collision course, we were just wondering what that could have been.
Meteor or another object making some kind of re-entry. Appears to be multiple objects following the same sort of trajectory. So very bright where we were.
Okay, that's copied. And is there a direction it was going in or anything? Right, it's copied, thank you.
The Virgin 76 also saw that in our 11 o'clock position, 2 bright lights.
Roger, that's copied, thank you.
Glad it wasn't just me. No, yeah, very interesting that one.
Say again. Okay, thank you.
Virgin 76, I saw 2 bright lights, 11 o'clock, seem to back over to the right and then climb away at speed, at least from our perspective.
Okay, we're passing that on there, thank you.
Speedbird 94, Shannon.
94, go ahead.
Okay, just so you know that other aircraft in the air have also reported the same thing, so we're going to have a look and see.
The speed was astronomical, it's like Mach 2 or something.
Roger, okay, thank you.
So we don't know exactly how many pilots saw it. It seems like there's got to be at least 3 that openly discussed it. This came out. It's great to have this audio to listen to the whole thing, hear the entire exchange. Any quick thoughts before we get to the video? Because we've got video of this object as well, taken from the ground in the northern part of Ireland. We'll play that after we get through our analyzation of the audio. Any quick thoughts?
I mean, I have a kind of a rebuttal, I guess, from John Burroughs. I touched base with him a little bit. I don't know if you want me to share that now or maybe after.
Sure. Yeah. No. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Basically, a lot of people are saying it was a meteor or bolide, or whatever you want to call it. But and that may be the case. Who really knows? I don't know either way. But Burroughs made a comment about how some people have linked, UAP to meteor activity. Like maybe they're flying around together. So I asked him about that, and he responded, quote, Project Condign and Pike's book goes into the fact UAP activity increases during those kind of events. Pike was studying the phenomenon to include the involvement of that kind of activity. It's boring stuff, but the military has been looking at this for years.
It's a great way to cloak your ability and coming into our atmosphere.
Well, I would interject and say that if the others have do have a time scale in which they want to introduce their presence, then you could make the argument that they do see meteor showers as an opportunity, because if there's meteor showers, then you kind of have a more of a plausible deniability. I mean, I'm not saying that's likely, but it could factor into why the UAP sometimes show up, or it could just be that meteor showers get confused with UAP and it's just meteor showers. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think the video is it's pretty impressive, but getting back to the audio, it looks like if you look carefully at where the BAW flight is, you can see it. The path of the object must have been north of where they were at. She is talking about the object coming up from behind her to her left and passing her by that way. And then the Virgin flight, which is several miles roughly to the west off the coast of Ireland, he sees it in his 11 o'clock position. So you see the way his plane is pointed. They're at roughly 11 o'clock. So... excuse me, allergies, unfortunately. It looks like maybe this object is roughly flying over Limerick, somewhere in that area. Sorry about that. Your thoughts, fellas?
Well, I'll just say that the fact that I guess it was 3 pilots. When I was reading it early on, some sources said 2, some said 3. So I guess I'm going to take your word for it. It was 3. But Breakaway mentioned this, and he said, look, pilots are trained observers. They know what meteorites look like. And the fact that you have 3 separate pilots radioing to the control towers is significant, because you don't utilize those lines unless you really feel compelled to do so. So on that account, it makes me wonder, maybe it was a genuine UFO.
You okay, Frank?
Yeah, I'm having some allergy difficulties, unfortunately. My throat's drying out on me. At one point, the one pilot who definitely saw it, and again, we're not 100% sure which flight he's on, he identified it immediately as a meteor. So that I have a tendency to believe UFO witnesses. So that really got my attention. That did not get a lot of coverage in the mainstream coverage, and I think it's an important point. I believe UFO witnesses, so... oh, excuse me. So I'm leaning towards... I'm leaning hard towards meteorite for the moment, and then as the week went on, we've got a little bit more. But you guys have anything else you want to interject here? Because my voice is going on me, unfortunately.
I would say that we need to be very careful with these kind of reports, because, we are part of the quote-unquote UFO community. So I think... having a healthy amount of skepticism with a report like this is really important, because if we're all like, no, man, it wasn't a meteor, it was a UFO, people are going to look at that like these guys are crazy. And not only public perception, but I think that Frank has a point. I think it's a very appropriate perspective to think that it probably was a meteor. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I mean, we've got plenty of information on this case, so it's great to see it. It's great to be able to break all this stuff down. It really is.
Yeah, I would like to see actual radar if they picked anything up.
Apparently they didn't. The guy on the ground reports back from Ireland. He must have been, I'm not sure exactly where in Ireland, but he said they didn't have anything on their radar.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's kind of like, what do we consider proof now at this point? Also, and maybe people are seeing different things. Maybe they all saw the same thing. We just don't know. But, even when we have videos of stuff, people say it's CGI. Or that we have pilot testimony and they say it's wrong. So it's really hard for any of us to say what's going on. But there was definitely meteors in the air. It seems like that night. So
Well, this footage turned up on Friday via newsletter.co.uk. This is dash camera footage from maybe a lady, maybe a gentleman named Sandy Laverty in Coleraine. Now, to add some additional perspective on the entire case, this is taking place at 6:45 in the morning. So these pilots are at the end of long overnight transatlantic flights. This individual, Sandy Laverty, is driving south to work in Coleraine, which is in the very northern part of Ireland, and picks up this particular bit of video in the dashboard cam. Apparently did not see it because there's no mention. We can actually talk over the video, but here's the video now running. And you can see in real time how it's two objects, exactly the way the Virgin Air pilot described it. So he's got a good eye. The other pilot who said meteor said multiple objects. We're not sure how many he means by that, and don't know if he had a better look at it, if he's closer. We're not 100% sure about that. So there's still some unanswered questions about the entire incident. But you can see very clearly with the video slowed down, you can see clearly two objects. This seems like a pretty good fit based on the time of the incident, the date.
Regarding the media coverage, I think it's very interesting because from my perspective, let's call them the others, I guess, as everyone likes to call them these days. The others have a new card up their sleeve that they never had before. I mean, if something even half the Phoenix Lights were to happen today, you can only imagine how the media would just latch onto it, and it's almost as if the others have more control over disclosure than they've ever had before. You can make that argument.
I would agree. I mean, Tucker Carlson actually had a pretty long segment about this very event, so I agree with Ryan. The media coverage is huge now, more than ever.
I have so many mixed feelings about the Tucker Carlson stuff. I think some of it is really great. Did y'all actually see the whole Ireland thing? Like that other guy, he was smiling the whole time, and it just felt corny to me. But it was really cool that they were talking about it, and it was cool that it was on a major network. At the same time, I didn't think it was the greatest report, but hey, we got to take it.
It's better than nothing. And honestly, Tucker, I'm going to break something, is a closet UFO, not researcher, but he's very interested in the subject.
Yeah, he's been on this even before there was a TTSA. He would do the occasional story on UFOs, and they would pop up. So he seems
that's
into
cool,
it.
and shout out to him for doing it. I kind of wish he would have one of us on rather than some smiling guy.
The smiling guy. No smilers.
I'll ask him on Twitter. Yeah, I think he's too busy with the whole Antifa fiasco at his house right now. But I digress.
So, yeah, definitely got a lot of big coverage. And Danny, you played something of a role in getting Breakaway, who seemed to be the catalyst for the mainstream really picking this up. Can you go into that a little bit? You got a nice little shout out from him in his article.
Man, that was so nice of him. It made me feel so great. But I didn't do a whole lot. I think maybe my site was probably the first American site to run the story. But Jamie had posted it on Facebook, and immediately it reminded me of Arizona and Oregon and the other Breakaway stories. So I ran it, and it was like 4 a.m. when it broke. I didn't sleep at all that night, and I was just doing it the whole time. And but yeah, I think I maybe had the first in America, but that isn't a whole lot. It's not like I came up with a story or anything like that. I just was able to see the Irish reports. And Breakaway is the man. All of his articles are incredible. He's done historic work, and so we all just were waiting for him to chime in. Yeah, he is the best.
Yeah,
no doubt.
He's a good guy to have on our side.
He really is. He's
more thorough than everybody else, and he knows more about aviation than everybody else. So, like, you can read CNN, you can read Fox News, you can read this and that, but Breakaway is definitely the best source when it comes to sightings.
Hopefully we have more cases like this, because it was fun kind of putting together the breakdown and the play-by-play of what happened there.
Well, Oh, I'm sorry, Frank. I was
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
say,
Just to finish up, Dave Beatty had really inspired me to put a little something more than the usual together to help try to visualize this event. So I channeled Dave a little bit when I put this together. So hopefully, folks do have a clearer idea of what actually happened. And again, I'm definitely, after seeing that video, and the fact that it coincided so well with what the Virgin pilot reported. Now, one thing it's important to note, and I want to get to this before we move on and review Dave's film, which we certainly want to do. One thing that I want to note is that video, of course, was taken in the very northern part of Ireland. Ireland is roughly 300 miles from the northern tip down to the southern tip. So in the video, the object is pretty low in the sky. So as a result of that, I'm going to have to assume it's not 150 miles to the south of the folks in the north, or 150 miles north of the pilots. It seems like it's the altitude is a lot higher than that. So it's got to be a lot closer to these pilots, maybe within 100 miles, maybe even closer than that, maybe 50 miles. Who knows for this with the British lady pilot. You've got to wonder exactly how close it was. And looking at that video from, maybe 200 miles away, maybe 250 miles away, if you're seeing that a lot closer, that's going to give you quite a start if you guys got to see that video. I'm not sure if you did or not.
yeah, I've seen it. My question is, what does a bolide look when it's coming into an atmosphere and heading towards the Earth? What does it? I mean, I've not seen any UFO researcher give me a visual representation. I've only seen a meteor at close range once in my life, and it was a hugely epic moment of my life. It was maybe a quarter of a mile away from where my cousin and I were camping at night, and it was a huge display, and it lasted maybe 2 or 3 seconds. It was really, really bright. It lit up the land like it was daylight. It was really crazy, and I've never seen anything like that ever again. But I would just like to know what a bolide looks like. And I'm not saying that it's not a meteor. It's just I want some background, I guess.
I'm sure that there are plenty of videos of ID'd meteors coming in that you can check out. They often turn up if you're. Sorry about that. If you remember the meteorite that crashed in the Soviet or the Russia a few years back, there are plenty of videos.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, you can see it, and again, it looks pretty consistent. But we'll see. We'll see if some more stuff comes out. But with the video, with the pilot accounts, and again, that one pilot jumping in right away saying he thought it was a meteor or a bolide, I would say that that's pretty solid. Like I say, I believe the witnesses. I believe witnesses.
Yeah, so do I.
It's a little unfortunate that this one got kind of muddy. I mean, but we do just want the truth, period. But this one kind of got a little bit muddied up. But then we could still go back to Arizona, Oregon, and these other ones where there was no meteors reported at all. So those
and it was in the daytime as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to imagine these pilots. I mean, these are overnight transatlantic flights. I think the Virgin Air guy was maybe it was the no, it was actually the pilot who said he thought it was a meteor. It was kind of saying, "I'm glad somebody else saw that." You don't know how tired some of these guys are. What kind of schedules they're working at 7. They've been working overnight, and it's 6:45 in the morning after a long flight across the Atlantic. They've got to be a little concerned sometimes about their own senses playing tricks on them and making sure that what they're seeing is actually there. So there was some expression of relief from the one pilot when it was confirmed to him what he saw was seen by others as well. So that's a good thing for that.
Yeah,
okay.
I think.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's better. I mean, even such a case like this comes up, and it's not anything, and we cover it. I mean, it's only making us more competent that we're able to kind of settle on what it likely is, rather than jumping at every anomalous event and saying UFO.
We're able to break it down. We've got some data, and we've got enough to go on.
Yeah, so I mean, that only proves our competence as researchers in the field, and that the field can be taken more seriously because rather than this getting out, it's kind of cool that it made a UFO story around the world. That that's pretty cool within itself. But that we're able to kind of do damage control and say, hey, wait, looking at all the data, it's Occam's razor. It's likely this is not a significant case as far as UAP.
Yes.
It just proves our competence, and also it helps us within the community from the story spinning out of control. If we're able to provide information to other researchers and break it down for them, so they're not going on social networking posting saying this is UFO, this is UFO, this is UFO, and the skeptics are like it's a meteor. So we can kind of contain that by doing good work.
Yep.
And I'm not 100% convinced either way, but there was meteors in there, that's for sure. But I do like John Burroughs' point about the UAP activity during these meteor showers, maybe, and that's something I'm going to be trying to dig up more info on. And if anyone has anything about that, please send it to me. And
like Frank said, real quick, I know he wants to go to the other next thing that we're going to talk about, but I do believe witnesses initially, and now correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the pilots said it made a turn, and in my opinion, meteors don't do that. But I'm not a scientist. I'm not I'm not anything like that, and I don't claim to be. So we'll see. I'm with Danny. I'm not convinced either way, really.
Yeah, for sure. And the point I'm trying to make, though, is what cases as a community do we want to emphasize and really lean on as to hold our argument.
Right. If you're trying to persuade people about the UAP presence, this is not the story to harness for that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very important to report on. I'm not saying that.
Sure.
And it's important to investigate. But, is this a case that we want to bring, as a headline to Congress to try to convince them? Maybe we have better cases.
No.
You know what I mean? It's like
I want the guy who made got pancakes made for him.
Oh yeah, well, just some other stories that I can't even mention on this show.
I know.
That are just
okay. Then let's move on and let's get to this past Wednesday when Dave Beatty finally released his documentary Triumph, the Nimitz encounters, and everybody who's seen it. Does anyone not think that this is a great little documentary? I guess not.
Well, Frank, you said it best, and I think you're right. This is the best reenactment of a UFO event in the history of television, frankly.
Yep, I agree with myself on that.
I agree with you.
I agree with you, too.
I've never seen anything that goes into this kind of detail.
Incredible.
That's done as well. We had Dave back on in April. We'll have him back on again. But I'm so proud to know the guy. I really am when he turns out this kind of work. This was a long time coming. Basically, a one-man job to a large extent as far as doing the CGI work and doing the cutting and all that.
1,000 hours.
Oh, Jesus.
That's
I
what he said.
don't even want to hazard a guess as to how much time
That's what he said. He said, I don't know if he was joking or not, but he said 1,000 hours.
No, I believe it. No doubt. CGI work is tough work. If you guys have ever played around with that a little bit, it is definitely tough work. But really quickly, some more specific thoughts on the movie.
And it's free, and it's on the internet right now. We can be sending this link to anyone we want to, and that's what Stephen Bassett's doing. So this is just really cool. I know people that don't really know anything about the Tic Tac. Now all of a sudden I can send them this. And I think this is going to be a big tool for us, probably for years to come. We could be sending people this. I am excited to hear that Kevin Day said another Tic Tac documentary is going to be coming out too. But especially because Dave was so accurate and everything was so credible that he did. He was just really, really accurate. There's no exploitation at all. He's talked to all the witnesses. It's just an incredible job.
And he's got Kevin in there doing basically a recreation of what a radar operator would be saying to pilots communicating back and forth. We don't have audio like we do with the Irish case, but this is about as close as you're going to get.
Yeah.
I think what Dave did is going to ripple out as we move into disclosure and beyond. I think that these really amazing reenactments are going to become very relatively common, and I think he's a pioneer in it for sure. And I think that we're going to start seeing, obviously he can't do all of the reenactments because he only has so many. There's only so many hours in the day, but we're going to start seeing, I predict, reenactments of the Iran event. And all the other events that have taken place, you're going to start seeing those crop up because, when all of humanity starts realizing that all of this is real, the incentive to create incredible reenactments is just going to go through the roof.
And that's why I've tried to send it to people who were loosely wanting to know more about it, and to people like my friends and family who don't care about the UFO phenomenon at all. I want them to watch this and be blown away, and then come back and say, "Hey, I guess you weren't that crazy, Chris." So I think it's an excellent thing. I think it's one of the best things that's happened in the last long time. I don't even know how long. Maybe since To the Stars became a reality. It really is a huge, huge deal, and I don't think Dave realizes that. I think that the fact that Stephen Bassett sent it out, the fact that he's going to send it to Congress, the fact that other people are going to be watching this for I don't know who said that. I got a short-term memory just a second ago that from years to come. It's a huge deal.
That was UFO Jesus.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But it all stems back to the Stars Academy. I mean, we can't really perceive the ripple effect. The gigantic rock that has fallen thousands of feet into the ocean. I mean, what Dave did is a direct outcome of To the Stars Academy. Without October 11th, this documentary doesn't exist, and you just have to think, what else doesn't exist?
Yeah,
I mean,
this podcast for one thing.
At this point, you can't exactly. My YouTube channel.
There you go. There you go.
And when you look at it in a macrocosmic level, it really gives you a glimpse into, what? Nothing's stopping disclosure now. Like, that rock has already hit that ocean, and those waves are just coming out, and they're going to keep coming out, and there's nothing that can stop it. Not any religious fundamentalists in the Pentagon, not anyone in the Pentagon that doesn't want to go to jail for their crimes, whatever. It's a done game as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, everything that's come out since, it's built such a momentum, and it seems like we're not even seeing the real effects from it yet. I mean, like the most deepest impact of it.
It's the A-tip of the iceberg, James.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, because this ripple effect that UFO Jesus here is praising us with the good word of is going. I mean, this is a historic moment that is going to have an effect for decades. I mean, obviously, we're probably going to see a lot of hard-hitting, short-term effects, but I mean, this really changed the course of history for this subject.
What's really crazy to me, and some people have kicked around this theory, it may be true, is that maybe the only reason the Nimitz stuff came out was because that video was leaked years prior. So that might have been the only reason. Like, how many other incredible cases are there? I mean, I know there's
I'm still dying to find out more about Stephenville. Because I mentioned before that I did get in the question with George Knapp when he was doing a little AMA over at the Coast to Coast site. I asked him specifically, did these guys, because it happened on Elizondo's watch, did they investigate Stephenville at all? So that is the case that I'm right in your neck of the woods, Danny. That is the case that I want to find out more about what they got on their end. Because
how many? They're scrambling jets for like all of these. Almost it seems like.
Yeah.
So how much gun camera footage is there really? I mean, we have no idea. There's a lot.
Well, I would imagine that the government has, and I use that term loosely, but the government probably has thousands of hours of footage of various things, objects. From World War II and maybe even a little bit before to present day right now. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I want to say what I'm sorry for interrupting, but what disturbs me about what he was saying, Chris, is that not only do they have hours of footage, but the resolution on that footage is way better than what we saw. I mean, Fravor said that he saw a video with much better resolution to the extent that he could actually see appendages coming out of the damn object. And he also mentioned, a lot of people didn't catch this, he also mentioned that small little objects also descended out of the object. And I'm thinking to myself, this is only one video. The U.S. government has hundreds of these videos with high resolution. And it's like, why are we having this truth embargo? Does anyone know? That's all I gotta say.
Dave's movie only covers that one flight that he's got a lot of details on, but there were multiple flights. We know that. Dave knows it too. He mentioned it in the movie, but
Dave Beatty's in the chat right now, and he just said Kevin Day said many pilots all launched, and they were all making intercepts that day, not just one.
There you go.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say, and somebody also made the point somewhere that that was the FLIR footage. That wasn't even the electropical data. That wasn't the the gun camera footage of just what they were seeing. That was just the FLIR footage.
And if you look at the Roosevelt 2015 event off the coast of Florida, we only get a small little piece of it. It's a much longer video. So it's like I keep asking myself, why are we having this truth embargo? The U.S. government has endless amounts of evidence, yet we're a bunch of schmucks on the outside debating this subject.
What's really crazy is the Claris Island stuff. Putoff has told us that they have 12 hours of Claris Island footage that the Brazilian government recorded, that Bass received it or something like that along those lines. I mean, that's there. It's on deck. I mean, I just want to see it.
Jay, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, because we can see that those discs that were present again on the website actually had declassified written all over them from the Pentagon. So these must have been somewhere or somehow they must have been officially released by the government, right? If they got declassified written onto the discs that they're prepared on. If there's 4 of those discs, they must have so much more information on them. Completely to Ryan's point, there must be thousands of hours. You know what I mean? This is just like a small, tiny little sample of data that they've got present. Even if it's a few gigabytes of data, it's going to be tiny compared to what they've got. But that information is declassified. Now, I figure if they've got their HD resolution footage, you can see it really, really well. It's probably a case of they don't want to release that at the moment because it's just going to be too groundbreaking too quickly. It seems to me like it's a slow release. Yeah. They want a slow release of information. They want to climatize people to this stuff. That's how it looks to me. Do you know what I mean? And it seems
I agree, Jay. They want to walk the public to this phenomenon, not run them. Because if you run them, the public's going to go haywire, whether you like it or not. They are. Even though I hear people all the time tell me, but Chris, December 16th didn't do anything. Nobody cares. I couldn't.
There is some truth in that now, Chris. There's some truth in that.
That's a ridiculous argument.
I really do disagree too, because I was on a radio show. I can't remember. My memory's not the greatest. Maybe it's too much CBD. But in any case, I mentioned in this radio show that when I was getting physical therapy after my surgery this past, it was maybe January, there was a female C-130 pilot she had, I think, some kind of issue with her ankle. And she was overhearing me, my therapist, talk about the whole ATIP program. And he was asking me a few different questions and then talking about the video of the Tic Tac. And she chimed in, which she said she would have never done before. She had a sighting when she was flying in Alaska where a UFO, UAP, whatever you want to call it, came alongside the C-130 and flew along for about 10 minutes and then just slowly drifted away. And her and her co-pilot and the crew members basically said, we're not going to talk about this because if we get back to base, the anchorage, they're going to grill us on it, so we're just going to shut up. And she said to me, the only reason why she told me this story is because of the fact that the December 16th news articles came out and it was being played on the TV. So I don't buy that nobody cared about December 16th. I disagree. I see it all the time, but whatever.
I have mixed feelings on it. It did great, and it made a historic impact. I mean, the videos have only been released. It hasn't even been a year. What an amazing year it's been. It's just crazy. Think back to 1 year from now. and where we're at
Well,
now,
it has
it's totally amazing. At the same time, you ask normal people on the street, and most of them haven't heard about it.
What I think
Well, and
was
even
interesting about the video
Those
is the
ripples
fact that it had
haven't
the thing
gotten to where they need to go yet, but like it's been set in motion.
Yeah.
But Danny's right. Danny's right. The main street, you ask the average person on the street, they're not going to know. But I think that what To the Stars Academy in December 16th and October 11th accomplished is it set in motion that at a period of time not too far into the future, they will know about it, and maybe it will be the beginning of 2019.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we certainly hope so.
Well, and getting to kind of Frank's point, there's kind of like a middle ground. Maybe that, even what Ryan would dub the TTSA effect, with the release of all this stuff in the New York Times article, is it's actually creating that nonchalant attitude amongst the public more so. And maybe that's what they want. They want people to be able to look at the information, accept it, and move on.
Right.
Yeah, there's no question it's a real thing because before last year, this subject really did not get a whole lot of big-time media attention. It just didn't. So the fact that it's getting it's a drop in the bucket compared to what all they put out, in this 24/7 cycle that we're in. They're putting out just reams of information, endless stories about all sorts of things. This is a drop in the bucket, but at the same time, they're at least dropping something into the bucket, which is good.
And how crazy it has. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, Danny, go ahead. Then I'll make my point.
I'm just saying dumb stuff, but it just feels so crazy that it hasn't even been a year. Sometimes I just have to sit back and just think about that.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It hasn't been a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact that the government came out December 16th of 2017 and acknowledged that they had a secret program known as ATIP is huge, because prior to that, they said in 69, we're done with UFOs. We didn't have anything to deal with them. And now we know from Paul Dean's work that through the 70s, 80s, and even to the early 90s, they were very much knowing about the subject. That's a complete lie. So it's I don't know how I want to describe this, but like they're in a conundrum where, they want to tell the public, because I do agree with Grant Cameron, they paint themselves into the corner and they want to desperately get out of that corner by any means necessary. But at the same time, I don't know where I'm going with this, but
I buy into Stephen Bassett's hypothesis that when Podesta and Hillary Clinton were yapping their gums about UAP in a very public manner, people inside the Pentagon were getting concerned about that, and the stars aligned, and DeLong, while this was occurring, was also trying to get in touch with people, high-level officials, to create greater transparency on the subject. I mean, maybe Bassett's wrong, but I feel if you've watched any of his presentations, he makes a very persuasive case that Podesta and Hillary Clinton talking about the UAP subject for a full 2 years up until the election got people inside the Pentagon scared, and they wanted to get ahead of the issue.
The expectation being that she was going to get elected.
Yeah, she was going to get elected, and she was going to continue talking about it. And not only would she continue talking about it, but all you need is like clips from when she talked about it before. So now she's President Clinton, and people are like bring forth clips of her talking about UFOs, and then it's it would just become more in the public sphere than ever before.
I will say, Ryan, something shifted right as Barack Obama left office and then Trump became the president. Think back before the October 11th To the Stars Academy announcement. The biggest data dump of UFOs, even though it wasn't solely on UFO stuff, was the fact that the CIA released a ton of documents about remote viewing. And there was UFO stuff in there about like the Tehran case with the DIA. And I can't remember. There was a bunch of, but Barack Obama released all that right before he left office, which is really strange. I don't know if people remember that.
Yeah.
Am I the only one here that
No,
remembers
yeah, that was a big thing. He did, right before he left, he had a bunch of things declassified as he was leaving office.
So there was obviously some greasing of the wheels for this to happen.
Yes, I agree.
Well, he was on the Jimmy Kimmel show, and he was making some strange comments. Of course, he was asked. He knew he was going to be asked, and then he was on the other show, and he's talking to a little girl about aliens, and and he mentioned Area 51.
Yep.
First ever time a president acknowledged Area 51. So
I go back to also a Tom DeLonge interview where he said for some reason the green light has been lit. And I don't know and again, I don't know. I would love to know some of the insiders he was talking to before the Chris Mellons and the Louis Elizondos of the world. I mean, we know
from the wiki
Weiss. I know, but we know Weiss, but we don't know all the other ones.
not gonna.
We'll never find that out.
Well,
tucked away.
Well, that's true. We know McCaslin, and we know that other guy. I can't think of his name. The general. I can't remember his name. Kerry, I think. Kerry was the other gentleman. But yeah, I don't know. There's some kind of motion that they want this topic out there for whatever reason. I don't know.
There has to be a trigger. I mean, this is 70 years in the making. They didn't. The people who are actually have leverage and who facilitated the videos getting released. I mean, they didn't just wake up one day, you know what, let's do this. I mean, there was something that triggered them. I mean, I hate to say it, but I think if people in the Pentagon who were in charge of the secret thought they could maintain it forever, maybe it would be maintained forever. Who knows?
I honestly think that it's the internet's fault. I really do. I really think the internet is the game. I seriously do. I think it's a game changer. I mean, do they want to wait till another Gary McKinnon happens? Seriously?
Yeah.
Do they?
I mean, the internet definitely has a big role in it, but there's probably events or things that had transpired behind the scenes in the intelligence community that we don't know about, that they said, listen, we better start this process now, because like Ryan said, it's not like they just woke up and said, hey, Johnny, you know what? Let's put those videos out.
Yeah.
Let's get them out.
Grant Cameron is of the opinion that it's a number of these folks who were involved in this effort to get this information out from the inside are themselves experiencers, and therefore that's their motivation.
Yeah, but Grant Cameron is also saying that, this has been a long-term process that's been going on, and we just happen to be in the next phase of it. He's saying this is going back to Emmenegger and even before that, where they're dripping out this data, and every time they, it's like another phase or wave.
I would agree. I mean, his point to other governments just shutting up and not talking about it is correct. Whereas the U.S. government, they dilly-dally and they'll say one thing and do another. It's really weird. Like, we have like a schizophrenic U.S. government. Like, there's a religious side that says, these are demons and we can't have anything to do with them. And then there's a side that, no, we need this information released because, we've been hiding it for how long. And then I would think there's even a third arm that is worried that there's going to be blowback, i.e. indictments and getting sued. And, I don't know. It's got to be a mess for people.
Yeah. There's the fourth the group that I've been hypothesizing about, thanks to you, Chris, when you were talking about that Collins Elite stuff. And I may be totally off base on this. I'm just trying to digest it in my own mind. But and maybe there's another group that have tried a bunch of this stuff, and they've had really, really bad experiences, and now they decided that they don't want to do it.
I mean, that's an indication that I've seen that some people within the government have experimented with this, weaponized it to a degree, and they've got a bad result. Some people die, and then they say, we don't want to mess with it. But again, like Grant Cameron says always, there's no there. You don't know what you're dealing with truly. And I know Ryan, he may take offense to us a little bit, and I'm sorry, UFO Jesus, but
no, that's a misinterpretation. I've always maintained that the phenomena is probably multifaceted, that it encompasses physical extraterrestrials, and it probably encompasses interdimensional materializations, and maybe even something more exotic. So I believe it's multifaceted, but I've never said that it's entirely extraterrestrial. I don't hold that position.
Because some of our detractors pin you as the ETH guy. You know?
I don't know. I don't know where they're getting their information from, but that's
Well,
not my
because
position.
they don't watch your videos, though.
Okay.
But my point was, is they've messed with this stuff. They got a bad result, and then they're like, you know what? We're going to seal this off. We don't want people messing with it, i.e., Skinwalker Ranch. I do feel that there's been occurrences there where people have been affected negatively. But what I come back to is there's all these people like Chris Bledsoe, who is the experiencer of this phenomenon and who has dealt with To the Stars before they were To the Stars. And he says, this is love and light, and this is a good thing. I don't know. I mean, in my own experience, my own very personal experience, it wasn't good and it wasn't bad. So I can't sit there and say. So I don't know.
Well, Chris, I'm
wondering
glad.
about.
Go ahead. Sorry about that, Ryan.
What I'm wondering about is, Knapp has put forth in a recent interview on Phenomenon Radio or he suggested that maybe the Chinese and the Russians are further ahead in the ability to understand the technology that UAP encompass. And he chimed in that he has reason to believe, or he speculates that the Russians have become emboldened when they fly their aircraft near our carriers and so forth, because as a consequence of having made technological leaps based on their study of UAP technology. And I'm thinking, at first I thought, no, there's no way. The military, the amount of money the United States spends on military is huge, and it's way bigger than any other country, and it's astronomical. So how could it possibly be that other nations are further ahead? But then when you factor in, look at what Bob Lazar says about S4. When he was working there, he claims, now I'm kind of 50-50 with Bob Lazar at this point, although I got to think about it more. But he claims that when he was working at S4, there was only 22 human beings working on the flying saucers they had there. Now, I don't care how much your military budget is. If you only have 22 people working on flying saucers, then yeah, that alone makes me think, yeah, maybe the Russians and the Chinese are further ahead than us, because I bet you if they have flying saucers, they got way more than 22 people working on it. But the United States is so obsessed with secrecy, and China and Russia probably it's easier for them to maintain secrecy because they have more of a control structure. So when you really look at the entire picture, I think it's quite possible that the Chinese and the Russians have more understanding of the phenomena. And when you consider how much we pay for military budget, I think it's disturbing. And that's all I got to say about that.
And Ryan, to add to your point with Bob Lazar, he said most of those 22 people were military, not scientific capacity. So that is scary. That means like they literally have a gun to your head and they're telling you, figure it out. And it's like, we can't make this. It's like, we can't do this. And I mean, they did. I know there's a YouTube video where he describes with Knapp at a UFO conference in like 2015 or 2014 when Bob Lazar came out the last time. And he talks about how he and his coworker, there was only one other guy working on propulsion because the guy before Bob Lazar showed up blew up and died, even though one of the experiments they tried is they turned one of the gravity amplifiers on and they bounced a golf ball off of it and it hit the ceiling tile, and their superior Dennis, what's his name? Was it Dennis?
Dennis.
Dennis came in and said, "What the hell are you two guys?" Yeah, supervisor. He goes, "What the hell are you two doing?" And basically he didn't bother looking up, but there's the golf ball sticking in the ceiling. I mean, that's crazy. And if you do research on the U.S. government and how much money they've spent, Blank Check is a great book to look at that. It's crazy. And they even talk about like super secret programs. They focused on the B-2 stealth bomber and how much money was allocated for that. So, no, I agree, Ryan, that it's scary to think that we've lost the arms race to China and Russia. And to further that point, they sent operatives, am I hearing this right? They sent operatives to Skinwalker Ranch, spies, to spy on us. I mean, who else had that happen to was the Bentwaters incident in 1980. Afterwards, they were worried of Russian intrusion.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Chris, because one of the topics we've got on the agenda today is a connection between the Skinwalker Ranch and the Rendlesham area. That these are areas that have a lot of paranormal activity that may or may not be related to UFOs. And this is an interesting topic, and we do want to get into it. I know, Ryan, sometime back I was chattering with you, and I'm just as a theory, just sort of throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. I was wondering about the possibility that there could be these anomalous hotspots on Earth that these ETs can detect, and they just go and check them out and research them just the way we might want to. That's the reason you see UFO activity and these paranormal hotspots seem to come together. So let's go into this. Let's go into this connection between Rendlesham and Skinwalker. Anyone have any thoughts on the matter?
They're both placed. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chris.
I've talked enough.
No,
Basically,
what I was going to say is kind of a sideline. I'll just leave this as a quick note, and then you can go, Chris.
right.
Is that if you get into like the Rama material and some of the stuff Grant Cameron has been highlighting, but the Rama group has been around since the 1970s, doing going to these hotspots in South America and having these programmed sightings or contact events, which even the mainstream media in South America had recorded and reported on. They say that there's these places that they're natural portals or Zendras, and where exactly what Jeremy Corbell and others had said, where it's like a thin layer of reality where these different dimensions can kind of connect. But allegedly, they also say that the beings or the others can create synthetic portals, but that there's natural places on Earth that have to do with the geomagnetic field, like Sedona, Arizona, and Mount Shasta, and these other places like Skinwalker, where and some places in New Mexico, where I guess the dimensional layers are thin, and these things are more likely to happen in those areas.
I was going to add real quick. It is a thinning of the layer of reality there, and I would also argue that the Four Corners, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, because Christopher O'Brien mentions that on some of his expeditions to the St. Louis Valley, he's encountered with Rosemary Ellen Guiley these areas where the reality is thinner for some reason. I don't know. It's very interesting that
What does that mean, Chris? Reality is thinner. Explain that a little bit better if you can.
Well, I guess. Well, I can't really. I mean,
okay.
I think what he means is the veil that separates our realm from their realm thins, and so they can sort of interface with our realm more easily.
Yeah.
One thing I find really fascinating about when you examine the UAP phenomena and you examine the seemingly interdimensional phenomena, there's a distinct commonality that you notice right away, and that is with both the interdimensional and the UAP phenomena, they hold back. In other words, the UAP phenomena, like a huge triangle could fly over Washington, D.C. at any given time and disclosure's done. You could say the same thing about the interdimensional phenomena. When Bass and Nids was out in Skinwalker Ranch, the interdimensional phenomena did reveal itself, but it did so in a way where they couldn't really prove anything. And one of my fun little pet theories is that as we get closer to disclosure and as we go beyond disclosure, maybe the rules will change a little bit, and whatever's behind the UAP and whatever's behind the interdimensional phenomena will begin to reveal itself in a more intimate way, because humankind at that stage will be ready for it. And if that's the case, that would be pretty cool. That's all I got to say.
I have my own little theory on that. And again, this is just my own theory from my own experiences and observations, is that I do think that the interdimensional phenomena, if we're going to categorize this, right, and we're going to say, some of it is possibly, extraterrestrial biological or extraterrestrial in the way that we think of it, and some of it's interdimensional. My feeling on it is that the interdimensional aspect is more limited in our reality, and that the advanced technological, seemingly extraterrestrial UAP phenomena has more mobility to interact with our reality in a physical way.
I
at their
agree. I agree with
leisure.
I don't know about
Because-
that because we've seen lots of scientific papers, right? Quite recently, I've found a bunch that talk about communication with some of these different interdimensional groups. That there's scientific papers talking about different ways of interfacing with them. Even Earth Tech's International, so Hal Puthoff's company, he's got a scientist that works for him, a guy called Michael Ibisis or something like that. I can't remember his exact name. But he's released a scientific paper that is talking about quantum entanglement as a way of communicating with some. He mentions it as extraterrestrial, but who knows what it could really be. But it seems like there's some kind of way of communicating with these things. And I think if we're talking about the non-extraterrestrial hypothesis, then we might be looking at something else. There might be a few elements to it. I think there probably is. I think we're probably looking at something that's interdimensional and something that's ET. But if, from what I can tell from looking through all the scientific papers, we've got lots more information actually on the cryptoterrestrials or ultra-terrestrials. Seems to be, we've got loads and loads of different papers on it. Loads of different scientists have picked up this stuff and talking about how we can sort of communicate, or how certain elements of our brain, these kind of things, allow us to communicate with these things.
Yeah, it seems like. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish up there, Jay.
Yeah, I was going to say that is groundbreaking. You know what I mean? If we can start to prove this stuff, which it looks like we're kind of going in that direction to me, then that's going to be groundbreaking. And I think that's probably, at least from my perspective, that's the thing that, I think is more important. If there's this thing that's going on and there is this other reality or these other spatial dimensions, however it works, if we can prove that in any kind of way, wow, that's just going to completely change the world much more than any kind of disclosure on extraterrestrials.
Yeah, let me jump in here real quick, James. This may be related to a couple CIA docs that turned up a while back. We had them over at my group. A couple CIA docs. One of them was a resignation letter from Puthoff to the government. Apparently, as he was ready to go off and work at Earth Tech in Austin, Texas. And it mentioned the reason he was going was to work on something called psychoenergetics, which was a term I'd never heard before. And there was another doc in there as well that proposed to study into this very field. So this could be a new term for something we're already well familiar with. I'm not sure if anybody has come across the term before, but let's get a little bit of feedback on that. Psychoenergetics. Any thoughts on what that might entail?
Well, I just want to go back to what Jay was saying real quick, in that he's talking about these papers, and there's possibly a quantum entanglement where the phenomena can be interacted with. And as all you guys know, I'm launching my project next year called Engaging the Phenomena. And I want to say on some, at least an anecdotal level, that's already been done with CE5. It's a repeatable experiment just about anybody can do, where you can correlate intention or that kind of the use of consciousness with UAP sightings. Mm-hmm. And it's not something like, oh, well, maybe. I mean, a lot of this spawned from, UFO reports for decades always have some kind of trace or trail of a mental phenomenon, anomalous mental phenomenon, telepathy, the interaction with the UAP and the subjects, who are observing it. So I want to say on some level that's already been done. That they understand that, and I think that goes for the possible extraterrestrial and both the interdimensional phenomena going back for eons. You have all these different, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but you have these different like traditions that utilize ritual and all these different methods to interact with these wide range of phenomena, which could be interdimensional or angelic or demonic or whatever you want to put it in a box as, or try to explain it as, and extraterrestrial or physical discs and objects as well. I just wanted to put that out there on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, James. I think it's also worth pointing out, not only do we have scientific papers on this weird kind of quantum entanglement communication, and there's lots of them. It's not just one guy. I've seen loads of them, loads of different people. The NID scientists, Bigelow had these reports on this stuff. It's pretty well known in scientific communities. I think that some of this stuff is being hypothesized, but also
And Jay,
in addition, go on.
No, I was going to say, Jay, just for you, you'll know what I'm saying. There might be an active program right now that somebody we know named Tyler is involved with.
Right.
That's actually,
yeah.
That's
Diana's
that's
friend.
going on right now.
What I find bizarre about the interdimensional phenomenon, and I think I heard Grant Cameron say, and I think Alien Protocols also said the same thing, and I take issue with it. Hopefully I'm representing what they meant, but from my understanding, they basically said that the intention you have, the phenomena responds to that. And to some extent, I agree with that. But there is a wrench that can be thrown into this perspective. And that is when you look at some of the ex-military special operations personnel that worked at the Skinwalker Ranch, they were followed home by these entities. And Knapp has said that the more kind of confrontational your attitude is, the more likely you're to have a negative experience. But here's the problem. How does anyone account for the fact that Knapp also said that the people that seem to be affected the most, and this is, someone can correct me, was what I interpreted, the people that are affected the most are not the ex-military special operations people who went onto the Skinwalker Ranch property, but Knapp seemed to underscore that it's the family members of the special operation people. And when you hear stories like that, it almost comes off as they're kind of evil. Like, don't go after the family members. If you don't like someone, go after the person you don't like. But beyond that, and it was very fascinating in the Phenomenon Radio interview, Knapp even said, and he was reluctant, he didn't really want to talk about it. He chose not to go into detail, but he said that he did not have any interaction with the phenomena from all his visitations to Skinwalker Ranch, but that his wife did. That's all I want to say.
Yeah,
oh, wow, I haven't heard him say that about his wife. It is kind of like a mafia tactic, right? Like go after their family and really get them.
The Phenomenal Mafia.
Just in my own, and I think I've shared this with James and Frank when I was on this past May, but like I did a stupid thing with chaos magic, and I got a result in my house that was a negative one, and it didn't affect me. It affected my wife and my daughter. So, I see where they're coming from, and I only have this one little anecdote where there was a Michigan MUFON director who was at a conference, a paranormal conference here in Michigan a couple years ago, and he had to get going home, but there was a psychic who said, I can make UFOs appear on demand. And he was very skeptical. But some of the people that he knew went with this psychic, and she did. She made UFOs appear over Lake Michigan, and a number of them. And these people that were with her called the Michigan State Director and had told him about that, and he was blown away. And then it seems psychic went to a Michigan UFO conference and basically did the same thing, but when he was there. So, I mean, and again, my question is, I don't know what I'm dealing with because there's no there. Like, I can't dial it up. It's not like taking a cell phone and calling you, Ryan, or you, Frank. I know who I'm calling. You're just putting attention out into the quantum. I'm not a scientist, and I honestly, some of this mumbo and I'm going to say
the quantum hologram, I believe.
Yeah,
Edgar
this
Mitchell
mumbo jumbo stuff kind of makes me like my eyes glaze over because I understand it, but I don't know. I just from my perspective, I see all the points, and I just don't know that sometimes people wish they had contact with this, and really, to be honest, no, you don't sometimes because you don't know what you're dealing with. Yeah.
One is I've been told by one of our friends that basically the people that don't care are the least affected. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to mention, and then I will have something for Jay, but earlier we were talking about hotspots, and everything that you guys are saying makes sense. And I believe it. But then also we have kind of conflicting reports from Dr. Eric Davis, and he made it sound like NIDS came to this conclusion too, that there are no hotspots. And, you can, what did he say, throw a dart on a map, and you'll find a lot of this same activity, maybe because it just isn't getting studied there. But
yeah.
I
think there's some truth to that, but my personal perspective is that's a very compelling point, but I still think that there's probably an unusual amount because, for example, if you look at Skinwalker Ranch and you look at the historicity and you interview a bunch of people in that area, there will be a much higher percentage of people living there who have stories to tell than if I go to like some town in Wisconsin and interview people. Did you see XYZ? Now, maybe you could argue that they're just more susceptible to it, or they're more credulous. I don't know, but it's a compelling point. But I still think there are hot spots to some extent.
And so many of these stories and so many of the things we talk about, it's just not a clear-cut answer, and it's not one or the other, and it's really amazing, and it's also really, really, really confusing. But I wanted to hear what Frank. I would like to hear Jay answer Frank's question because that's really his specialty. What was that term you used, Frank?
Psychoenergetics, I believe it was.
So what do you think about that, Jay?
Well, I've not really heard too much about it.
I've never heard it before either, before I saw those CIA docs, so it kind of took me by surprise. Again, I think it could just be a different name for something we already understand pretty well, but I'm not sure about it, and I want to ask around about it.
The best I've
something to do with intent, isn't it? I think because there's lots of talk of consciousness. There's loads and loads of studies on consciousness again, and I know that some of the reports, I think it was that the CIA had from some of this research that came from Hal Puthoff years and years ago, was that you can remotely influence people, so you can actually change somebody's intent. Just by willing it to happen to some extent. I mean, I don't know too much about it or how it's done or anything like that, but I've definitely seen some of these reports. And there was the suggestion in this CIA document that the US government were worried about Russia interfering with certain people's views and trying to influence them one way or another. But that's about all I can say on it. I don't know too much else. But if consciousness, if we look to magic and, esoteric stuff, we can say that lots of these kind of religions or these ancient religions seem to suggest consciousness is fundamental. We know that there's been loads and loads of talk about consciousness, about these people that are like DeLong and stuff like that. So if we consider consciousness being somewhat fundamental and you're kind of making your reality with the way you perceive things, then I guess, these psychoenergetics or whatever you want to call it, you can probably will certain things to happen depending on belief structures and these kind of things. But, that's just my assumption.
Well, Jay, since you have the floor, you had brought up that you wanted to get into a little bit of a discussion about patents related to reverse engineering, that type of thing. So what do you have for us on that particular area? Yeah,
so I kind of didn't hear too much about implants, these kind of, in inverted commas, alien implants. But I watched Jeremy Corbell's Patient 17, and I also watched some YouTube documentary about it. And I found it quite an interesting subject, that these people are finding these devices, these strange metals that have odd isotopic ratios that don't appear to be from this solar system. And they just find them in their leg or in their neck or in their brain or wherever else it is. And we know that during the DIRD report, so George Knapp had released this report with all these, I think it's 40 something or 37, something like that, these scientific reports. Now, one of them was a guy called Bruce Towe, Towe, Towie, or however you want to say it. But this guy has a patent on something that looks an awful lot like an alien implant. Do you know what I mean? And you read through this patent, and it seems to describe exactly what Jeremy Corbell showed in his film Patient 17. The descriptions of the device sound and look exactly like the devices from within this film. It's incredible. And if this guy was preparing this scientific report for the Pentagon on, I think it's that small, I can't remember the name of the report off the top of my head, but it seems like he's had some exposure to these things, and now he's got a patent. So he's kind of patenting this technology that he's been researching. And now, kind of where do you really draw the line with this stuff? Can you really patent something that's come from somewhere else? If it's non-human, kind of what are the rules on this stuff? Again, the same thing could be true.
The rules are if you get the patent in first, it's your patent, baby. That's how it works.
Well, that's it,
I mean,
right?
it's as simple as that. That was one of the things that Gary Nolan mentioned when we did our little AMA that turned into an article over at my website. If he knew what this stuff was actually, what its purpose was, he'd be filing patents right now.
Well, we've seen other ones as well. Do you know what I mean? There was one for metamaterials. So I was hunting around. I think it was Los Alamos who released this patent on metamaterials. I'm just kind of drawing to conclusions. I don't know that any of this stuff is because they've researched these materials that found from crash sites or whatever. I don't know. But it sounds like the way they describe it is if they've found these materials and they've been working with it, trying to understand what it does. Once they get to some sort of conclusion as to what they think the purpose of it is, they're releasing these patents for it. And the metamaterials one talks about formatting or creating these layered materials. So it might be metal with some other material in between, or layered different types of metals. And then if you radiate these metals with terahertz frequencies or microwave frequencies, it essentially gives you complete cloaking. And in the patent itself, it refers to perfect cloaking is how it describes it. Or I think it's something like perfect or complete cloaking or whatever. And that's incredible. We haven't seen any of this stuff before, right? We've never seen any craft that had perfect cloaking.
I would disagree, Jay. And you need to read the book Camelio. It talks about a heroin addict who gets his hands on a government computer and some night vision goggles, and then he's followed for the next couple of years up until 2016. He's followed by people who have adaptive camouflage, and I know Danny has heard me talk about this before, but there was a case that I worked on. Just tangential, I can't use that word, tangential. Anyways, I worked on it from the side. I was not a primary investigator, but there was I will just say a paranormal investigator in San Diego who came to me for a podcast, and I was mentioning To the Stars before they were To the Stars, and then he just briefly mentioned that he had in his paranormal group an FBI agent who had all this cool technology that would come to their group when they would go to these paranormal places, and he'd have all this cool tech. And this FBI agent was working on a case where it was in a hospital. A nurse on the 6th floor of the San Diego hospital. I don't know the name. I know the podcaster knows the name of the hospital, and he was scared to death when I asked him, was it a hospital that dealt with poor people or people who have drug problems? And he said, yeah, it was a community hospital. And his hair stood on the back of his head, and he was like, how would you know that? I go, I don't, but I read this book Camelio, and they generally test this adaptive camouflage technology on these people and I know it's going to sound crazy, but this FBI agent had a picture from this nurse, and I have the picture still, where this nurse said this thing came towards them. Now, we don't know if the nurse was a male or female, but this thing came towards them, and it looked like the camouflage from the movie Predator. So everything was behind was being reflected to the front. And it came up to them maybe 10, 15 feet, backed away, and that's when the nurse took a picture when it was walking away. Now, the photo itself looks like just smoke, and it looks like a not premonition, but like apparition. And I've had photo experts look at it, and they concur that it really is there. It's not like been doctored in any way. The other crazy part to this was the fact that I said SAIC was one of the companies that was doing this. They filed patents for this cloaking technology, and lo and behold, the FBI agent dun, 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 dies 2 weeks later after this photo was released. And I just know that they have worked on this before. I'm not trying to throw a wet blanket on you, Jay. I love your work. You're the document, and I couldn't do that. I give you mad props. But a book that you need to check out is Camelio. It describes Robert Guffey's friend who, like I said, he was a heroin addict. I know that's less than stellar to take his word, but this guy was messed with for so long, all kinds of stuff. What I was going to say is MK Ultra, the CIA. In fact, they're getting in trouble for it right now. They were wanting to use truth serum drugs on Gitmo detainees. So the CIA definitely knows how to use intent and how to get people to tell the truth or tell them what they want to hear. But yeah,
jumping in
Here's a
about
couple
the
of the
camouflaging capabilities, that's a subject that has long been of interest to the military for obvious reasons. Now, we've talked about these different military organizations rebranding, but one that hasn't for decades, going back to at least the post-World War II era, is the Bureau of Naval Research. There's still the Bureau of Naval Research after all these years. And they've been involved in funding university studies to figure out how an octopus can camouflage itself so perfectly and do it completely naturally. They don't have any kind of technology. They just, brush up against some seaweed or whatever, and all of a sudden, within a matter of seconds, they can look just like that seaweed. You can't tell it's an octopus there. It's really amazing if you see what some of these octopuses can do. And again, you've got to see it for yourself. But there's the military definitely wants the camouflaging technology, no doubt about it. They've been working at it for a long time, and apparently through multiple ways of trying it out. Technologically, looking at biological species that can do it, all manner of different ways.
Yeah.
A couple of the DIRDs, and for anyone listening that doesn't know what a DIRD is, it's the Defense Intelligence Reference Document, and they're from the OSAP program via BASS. But you got the invisibility cloaking, which is number 7, and that's by Dr. Lionheart, I think is how you pronounce his name. This is from the NAP DIRD list. And then the other...
Danny, you're breaking up.
Referencing was on... Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep going.
The other two that I think Jay was talking about by Bruce Toe is number 6, which is biosensors, biomems, MEMS, and then also number 17, which is biomaterials by Bruce Toe.
Yeah, and his patent as well talks about these devices that are inside people's bodies is collecting biometrics. So presumably testing the bloods or collecting data on the person, and also neuro something or other. I can't remember the actual
neurosensoring.
No.
Hey,
neurostimulation. Neurostimulation.
I'm going to throw a wrench in this real quick, this conversation. Has anybody, and I'm going to mention a name that, again, I'll probably get crispy for it. It's okay. Stephen Greer with William Pollock. He's describing, William Pollock is describing to a T what you're talking about, Jay. That he saw this technology being implemented at Tonopah, where they would get these implants and they bought a boatload of them, and they were going to go into the public sphere and they could test or monitor all kinds of features of humans. So you may want to look at that interview. It's on YouTube.
Chris,
It's on serious disclosure.
We've got the technology yet. Honestly, I don't. We might have a minor variation on it. I know that we've got implants that allow people to gain access to buildings. These kind of things, very basic level implants. But I don't see how at the moment we can collect biometrics on people through an implant and then send out the signal through some frequency.
Well, I mean, how much money have we spent on this topic? Exactly. I mean, seriously, in the U.S., I guarantee you trillions of dollars.
Yeah, if you want to include the stealth plane technology, I would include that along with the whole general concept. So, yeah, definitely.
I mean, we have wasted a lot of money, and I would think they look at it as an investment, and if you don't get a return on your investment, they're going to stop it, right? So at a certain point, you have to wonder about some of these patents and how far they've been able to go with this stuff. I mean, Richard Dolan always talks about that scientist, that CIA guy that he talks to, that he's never mentioned his name, that they had the computing power in the 1960s of the 1990s, but in 1960. So, I mean, obviously, there's a hidden ability or hidden I hate to quote him, but a breakaway civilization, so be it. I mean, there kind of already is. I mean, if Ryan and I are talking that there's only 22 people working at S4, that is a breakaway civilization because they're not going home and talking about that. And they know stuff that you and I don't know. I mean, the only reason why we know about S4 is because of Bob Lazar, right? So
that's an interesting point, Chris.
Yeah. I don't know. It's too much CBD for me. I can't keep it track.
Hey, Chris, is that a plug?
Yeah.
Well, we're 2 hours and 10 minutes into this. We've had a record crew here, and we've got a record length of time. We've covered all the topics we had scheduled. Does anybody have anything else that we haven't covered that you just want to get out there?
I mean, I could probably go for another 5 hours, but
I think we could.
Yeah.
I think this is probably one of the best roundtables I've ever been a part of.
Oh,
to
awesome.
be honest.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree, man. This is a great group here we got going here. I think we should do it again. I'm looking at dates here, and if everybody's willing and able, December 16th is a Sunday. If we want to do like a 1 year anniversary, do a 1 year anniversary of the New York Times article. December 16th is on a Sunday.
I'll have to see what my wife says, the boss.
Yeah. Yeah,
I pulled a fast one on her at the
Well,
last second.
we'll be good. We got more shows in the pipeline. We've got some pretty exciting stuff coming up. This has been great. Everybody's good to go though. Nothing more that you need to get out today.
Oh, I could keep talking.
Yeah, you can keep talking. Okay.
This is a good cut point. Because we're at a long time now, and of course all of us, and for some of us this is the first time talking to each other.
Yes, absolutely.
So I mean, we can really go on. So this is probably a good cut point, and we should probably bring this back sometime.
Yep, definitely want to do this again. Now, Ryan, you still with us?
I'm here and present.
Yep. Ryan, I'm honored that you decided to come on our show. I really am. And thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Hope to have you back. Maybe you'll do a whole show. Maybe you'll just do these roundtables. But it was a real pleasure, and I really enjoyed your contributions today. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, Ryan. Always good to chat with you. Sometimes we do it in between, but we got to do it again on air. Fantastic work today, Chris. Thank you so very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the panel members, too. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Frank. And thank you, James, for having us on. It's a real honor.
You bet. And Jay, again, thanks for having the time to come out here and join us. It was fantastic. I really do appreciate it.
I really appreciate the invite. Thanks, Frank. Nice to speak to you all.
Yes, absolutely. And Danny, you're the guy who's really out there plugging along. Who knows? We might have to have you back maybe just about every week. You're always breaking news over there. Got your website going. Congratulations on that. Thanks again for coming on, Danny, and appreciate your little scoop for us there this morning.
Thanks so much. I really, really love you guys, and I really love being on the show. I would do as many episodes as I possibly can forever. And I do want to thank everyone else. We got the scientist, Jay, and Chris, Ryan, James, and Frank. Everyone is just so great.
Yeah, and it just seems like it wasn't this morning that we broke that news. It was earlier this afternoon. It just seems like it was daylight out when that happened. So we've been going a little while here. And last but not least, I want to thank you, James, because you put this thing together. This was fantastic. Thank you so very much. I'm just glad to be a small part of it and work the boards a little bit. And thanks again, James. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Frank. Thank you. This is amazing that we're able to do this and put this together. So
All right.
yeah, I'm looking forward to more of them.
Fantastic.
James is such a great guy. Anytime I have a question, I can hit him up for personal advice, and he's always there to talk to me. So thanks, James.
Fantastic.
Oh, no problem.
This
I
could be
appreciate
be a little sideline for you, James, giving out personal advice.
Life coach.
No,
So, go ahead.
yeah, people who know me know, they know I like to help.
Yeah,
James is Buddha.
There you go. There
No.
you go.
Yes.
All right, well,
So we
I'm
got Buddha.
going to wrap up
We got-
the call now, guys, and thanks again for everything, and everybody listening. I think we had a record audience. We got a lot of promotion out of this before we got started. I think we had a record audience watching us live, up over 30 when I checked. It might even be higher. Who knows? But thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.